The air inside the house was heavy, like it had been holding its breath for days. Detective Lena Corbett stepped through the threshold, her boots compressing a layer of dust that hadn't settled right since the violence. 3 victims, Tomas muttered, his voice almost swallowed by the silence. The living room looked rehearsed, furniture arranged too neatly, lights still humming faintly, as if waiting for applause. Lena's eyes caught the toothbrushes lined on the bathroom sink. 4 of them, color-coded, gleaming. 3 bodies, she whispered. But 4 lives accounted for. The echo of her words seemed to stretch across the house, folding back on itself. Somewhere beneath that quiet, something unseen exhaled. It was as though the 4th toothbrush wasn't a mistake at all. It was an invitation. The morning after, the house looked different, less haunted, more offended. Lena Corbett sat on the porch steps, coffee cooling between her palms, trying to reconstruct a night that refused to fit. "You ever notice," she murmured to Tomas, "how silence feels heavier after you ask it a question?" He looked up from the evidence bags, the sun cutting a hard line across his tired face. "You think the 4th one came back?" he asked. She didn't answer because she didn't know which was worse, that someone returned or that they never left. The world outside the tape carried on. Joggers, school buses, life proceeding politely, while 3 corpses waited inside for meaning. By noon, the forensics team had finished their sweep, but Lena couldn't shake the feeling the house wasn't finished with her. She wandered room to room, tracing invisible patterns with her gloved fingertips. The toothbrushes had been bagged and labeled, yet she could still see them. 4 little soldiers waiting for inspection. "It's too intentional," she whispered. Tomas didn't look up from his clipboard. "Everything's intentional until it's random," he replied. A sound came from the hall, soft, deliberate, like the creak of a floorboard under a familiar footstep. Lena turned, heart stuttering. No one was there. Only the faint scent of mint toothpaste lingered in the air. The afternoon brought journalists. Microphones rose like bayonets. Evie Harland was among them, her tone more curious than accusatory. "Detective Corbett," she called out. "Why are there 4 toothbrushes when only 3 people lived here?" The crowd laughed softly, but Lena froze. "How did you?" Evie smiled, lifting her recorder. "Public record, you can tell a lot from what people leave by the sink." Tomas stepped between them, voice low, "Not now." But Evie's words lingered, an echo too sharp to forget. That night, Lena replayed the question in her head until it didn't sound like curiosity anymore. It sounded like a warning disguised as journalism. That night, Lena returned to the scene alone. The air was colder now, charged with the residue of questions unasked. Her flashlight beam trembled across the sink, empty. The toothbrushes were gone. Only faint rectangular outlines marked where they had rested. "Tomas, did you move them?" she whispered into her phone. No answer. She checked the evidence locker later. 3 toothbrushes logged, not 4. The 4th was missing, never recorded. Her reflection in the mirror looked back with someone else's expression. Behind her shoulder, for a fraction of a second, she saw a 4th reflection. Then the light flickered out. By the second morning, the case began to fray like a badly tied knot. Lena sat in the precinct's evidence room, fluorescent lights bleaching every surface into sameness. The chain of custody log was clean, 3 toothbrushes sealed, no record of a 4th. "That's impossible," she muttered, flipping through the pages. Tomas leaned on the counter beside her, his voice steady but cautious. "Maybe you miscounted." She looked up sharply. "You think I imagined it?" His silence was answer enough. Somewhere between memory and record, something had been erased. Not misplaced, erased, like someone had rewritten the scene after the fact. At noon, Evie Harland uploaded a teaser to her podcast. 3 bodies, 4 toothbrushes, and one missing truth, she said, voice smooth and calm against eerie piano music. The episode went viral in hours. Lena's phone buzzed non-stop with messages she didn't read. "She's making us look like fools," Thomas said. But Lena wasn't angry. She was intrigued. How did Evie know about the missing toothbrush before the department did? That night, Lena stood in front of her bathroom mirror at home, staring at her own toothbrush, blue, identical to one from the crime scene. "Coincidence," she whispered, but her reflection didn't nod. Lena and Thomas drove back to the house under an iron sky. The storm had started, thick drops pelting the windshield as though urging them to turn around. Inside, humidity clung to the wallpaper, amplifying the smell of rot and cleanser. "Look at this," Thomas whispered, pointing at the kitchen counter. 4 coffee cups sat side by side. 3 with faint lipstick or fingerprints, 1 perfectly clean. "It's happening again," Lena said softly. Her voice trembled, not from fear but from recognition. Whatever this was, it wasn't a crime scene anymore. It was an echo repeating itself slightly different every time. The forensic lab smelled of chemicals and anxiety. Thomas held up the test results, brow furrowed. 2 DNA traces on each toothbrush, he said. 1 matches a victim, the other, unidentified. Lena leaned closer, pulse rising. Unidentified how? He hesitated. ASIN, no record anywhere, no match in any database. The printer buzzed, spitting out a blurred photo of the white toothbrush. "Someone scrubbed their existence," Lena murmured. Thomas glanced at her. Or they never existed at all. The hum of machines filled the silence between them like the sound of something breathing just out of sight. Later that evening, Lena found Evie waiting outside the station, holding a brown envelope. "You're going to want to see this," the journalist said quietly. Inside were photographs, security footage stills from the night of the murders. 4 shadows entered the house. Only 3 came out. "Where did you get these?" Lena demanded. Evie met her gaze steadily. "From someone who wants the truth to have teeth." Rain began again, washing the sidewalk in reflected neon. Lena looked down at the final photo. 4 toothbrushes, arranged perfectly. In the corner of the mirror, barely visible, a 4th face smiled. Sleep became a rumor for Lena. That night, she dreamed in static and whispers, voices brushing against her ear like a cold wind. "Brush in silence," one murmured. "They'll hear the foam." She jolted awake in her apartment, sweat clinging to her neck. The city outside was black glass, reflecting her own window back at her like an eye. On the counter sat her toothbrush. White, not blue. She stared at it, trembling. She hadn't bought a new one. Her breath came shallow as she lifted it. The bristles were damp. Somewhere, the line between her home and that house blurred, erasing the safety she thought she had left behind. At the precinct, Thomas arrived early. His usual calm replaced by something brittle. "I checked the lab footage," he said. "There's a gap. 8 minutes missing." Lena frowned. "Erased," he nodded. "Or replaced. The system shows continuous playback. But those 8 minutes, they're not from our lab." They watched in silence as the screen displayed the evidence table. 3 toothbrushes in sealed bags. Then, faintly, a shadow passed the camera, and for 1 frame a 4th bag appeared, then vanished again. Lena whispered. "We're being watched," Thomas replied softly. "No. We're being rewritten." Evie Harlan's next episode went live that night. Her voice wove between static clips and real interviews, a soundscape of whispers, clicks, and silence. "What if the 4th toothbrush isn't evidence?" she said, "but memory." Lena listened in her car, parked outside the house again, engine off. Through the rain-spotted windshield, the building loomed like a thought refusing to die. Someone, Evie continued, was documenting behavior, routine, hygiene, trust. Maybe the toothbrushes were never meant for teeth. The words sank into Lena's bones. In the rearview mirror for just a second, she saw a face sitting in the back seat, smiling faintly, like they'd been listening too. Dr. Malcolm Sloan arrived the next morning, trench coat spotless despite the drizzle. "You wanted a profile," he said calmly. His tone carried the confidence of a man who'd spent decades turning madness into pattern. "The toothbrushes indicate ritual," he began. "Intimacy, repetition, contamination. Someone wanted to test how identity dissolves when routine is shared." Lena frowned. "A study," he nodded. 3 subjects, 1 observer. The 4th toothbrush was theirs. Tomas shifted uneasily. "So what happened to them?" Sloan smiled faintly. "Perhaps they're still observing. Perhaps they never left the room." That night, Lena dreamt again. Only, this time, it wasn't a dream. She woke to her phone buzzing on the nightstand. A new voicemail, distorted breathing. Then a voice she recognized. Hers. "Brush in silence," it whispered. "They'll hear the foam." The message timestamp matched the exact minute she'd fallen asleep. She replayed it, over and over, each time hearing another faint sound in the background. A steady brushing, rhythmic, methodical. She stared at her reflection in the dark mirror across the room. The voice on the phone whispered once more, softly, "Don't forget the 4th." The footage surfaced at 3:14 a.m. An anonymous email with no sender, no subject. Only an attachment labeled, "Bathroom footage final.mov." Lena and Tomas watched in silence. Grainy, flickering, black and white. The timestamp matched the night of the murders. 3 victims brushed their teeth side by side. Synchronized, mechanical. Then for a split second, the frame fractured, revealing a 4th person standing behind them, blurred, motionless, observing. The clip ended abruptly, leaving only static. Tomas exhaled slowly. "Tell me you saw that." Lena nodded, voice barely audible. "They weren't brushing to clean. They were brushing to be seen." Evie called Lena at dawn. Her voice shook for the first time. "Someone broke into my studio. Nothing taken, just rearranged." Lena arrived minutes later. The microphone stood in a perfect row. The walls, once cluttered with notes, were bare. Only the words, "Brush in silence," were written across the mirror in toothpaste. Evie's reflection trembled as she whispered, "They know we're watching." Lena touched the words with a gloved hand. They were still wet. Somewhere between message and ritual, the line had vanished. "No," Lena murmured. "We were never the ones watching. We were the test." At the lab, Tomas replayed the footage frame by frame. Every reflection showed an extra person. Bathroom mirror, fridge door, even the coffee pot. The 4th appeared where light met glass. "Maybe it's a distortion," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Lena pointed to a reflection of herself, faintly doubled. "No, it's a repetition. Someone or something replicating presence." Dr. Sloan's earlier words echoed. "Intimacy, repetition, contamination," she whispered. "We've been contaminated." Tomas turned toward her, eyes haunted. "Then who's recording us now?" The security camera above blinked red, on and watching. The night bled into itself. Lena returned to the Greenridge Hills house with Evie and Tomas. The air smelled like dust and static. The kind that builds before lightning. They descended into the basement, a door no one had found before, its frame hidden behind a false wall. The staircase groaned with every step. At the bottom stood a chair, a camera, and a mirror. 4 toothbrushes lay in a neat row on the concrete table. "This isn't where they died," Evie whispered. "It's where they were made." Lennon's flashlight flickered, And in the mirror, 4 figures stood where 3 should be. They watched the tape found beside the basement camera. Grainy footage again. 3 strangers brushing, the 4th behind the lens. The audio caught laughter. Then silence. Then a whisper. "Now you know how it feels to be seen." Lena's breath shook. "This was recorded live," she said. "Not years ago." Tomas' eyes met hers. Terror without language. Evie slowly turned toward the mirror. "It's watching us now," she whispered. The camera's red light blinked once, then twice, then went dark. In the silence that followed, Lena realized something. The reflection in the mirror was still moving. By morning, the basement had become a command post. Evidence markers dotted the concrete floor like breadcrumbs leading nowhere. Lena's voice was low, rasped from exhaustion. "There's no record of this house being built with a basement," she said. Tomas crouched near a vent, shining his flashlight into the darkness. "This isn't a basement," he murmured. "It's an addition. Someone built it later. For this." Evie stood at the top of the stairs, pale and silent. The air felt heavier, older, as though the house had grown roots beneath itself. Roots that drank secrets instead of water. "We are inside the experiment," Lena whispered. "And it's still running." Dr. Malcolm Sloan arrived unannounced, stepping into the basement with clinical calm. "You should have called me sooner," he said, his tone halfway between empathy and authority. He examined the setup, the mirror, the camera, the toothbrushes, with an almost reverent stillness. "This wasn't a murder scene," he murmured. "It was observation. 3 volunteers, 1 recorder, Lennon's eyes, heart." "Observation for what?" He smiled faintly. "Obedience?" Tomas turned sharply. "You think this was psychological?" Sloan nodded. "Behavioral conditioning." But the observer lost control. He glanced into the mirror. Or maybe they became the control. The discovery came from below. Tomas, tracing a strange vibration in the floor, found a small hatch beneath the concrete table. Inside, hundreds of toothbrush handles melted together, fused into a solid mass. "Why burn them?" Evie whispered. Lena stared, pale and still. "To hide DNA or to erase identity." Sloane's voice, soft but unsteady, echoed behind them. "No," he said, to ensure they couldn't brush anymore. His gaze lingered on the white toothbrush still intact. The 4th stayed clean. For the first time, his composure cracked. "That was mine." Lena turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "Explain." Sloane's confession poured out slowly, his voice detached yet trembling. "It began as a study on behavioral mirroring. How routines can create intimacy, even among strangers. But the subjects started sensing beyond the test. They began dreaming alike, finishing each other's actions." He looked down, guilt heavy in his eyes. "I stopped the experiment, but someone continued it. They called themselves the Observer." Lena's pulse quickened, and the 4th toothbrush. Sloane met her gaze. A symbol. Whoever used it wasn't cleansing. They were watching, controlling. The room seemed to tighten around them, mirrors breathing with invisible presence. The storm outside broke just as the power failed. Flashlights danced in the dark, slicing through the humid air. "Where's Sloane?" Evie gasped. The psychologist had vanished. Lena aimed her light toward the mirror. There he was, standing behind his own reflection, eyes wide, mouth moving soundlessly. The glass trembled. Then, with a sound like breath shattering, the mirror cracked down the middle. When Lena looked again, the reflection was gone. Only 3 remained in the room. But 4 shadows stretched along the wall. Tomas whispered. "The Observer never left." Lena turned toward him, her voice flat. "No, the Observer just changed hosts." The next morning, the precinct felt different. Quieter, heavier. The official report listed Sloane as missing, but Lena knew better. His disappearance wasn't flight, it was absorption. Evie sat across from her, pale and shaking. "What if the observer isn't a person?" she asked. "What if it's something that moves through whoever watches too long?" Tomas entered with a grim look, placing a new photograph on the table. The mirror from the basement, now fully shattered, but in every shard, the reflection was the same man's face. Sloane's. "He's still watching," Lena murmured. "And maybe we are too." Evie couldn't sleep. The basement had followed her home. In her apartment, toothbrushes lined the sink, 4 of them identical, though she swore she owned only one. The air smelled faintly of bleach and mint. Her recorder blinked red, though she hadn't turned it on. "This is Evie Harland," she whispered shakily into the mic. Day 6. The 4th toothbrush has appeared again. A soft brushing sound came from the next room. She turned slowly. The bathroom door stood open, faint light spilling out. The brushing continued. Steady, rhythmic, almost welcoming. "Hello?" she said softly. The brushing stopped. Lena and Tomas traced the origin of Sloane's experiment to a private research facility outside the city. Dust-covered records revealed the project's name, Observer Effect 14. Participants were chosen for one trait: loneliness. They wanted to see if shared ritual could replace connection, Tomas read aloud. Lena scanned the list of subjects. 3 names she recognized as the victims. The 4th field was blank. "No name," she said, voice low. "Just an id." 4. The room's security camera blinked to life on its own. A static voice filled the air. 4 is active. Then, the sound of faint brushing began. They brought Evie into protective custody, but safety felt like a word stripped of meaning. She sat in the observation room, facing a one-way mirror, the faint hum of fluorescent lights surrounding her. "I keep seeing him," she whispered to Lena, who watched from behind the glass. "When I close my eyes, he's brushing his teeth. When I open them, he's still brushing." Lena's breath fogged the window. For a heartbeat, she saw her own reflection blink separately from her movements. Tomas touched her shoulder, whispering, "You're starting to see it too, aren't you?" Lena didn't answer. She could. That night, alone in her office, Lena listened to all of Evie's recordings. The brushing sound grew louder with every file, like a tide coming in. When she reached the final entry, there was no voice, only the sound of 4 brushes in perfect unison. Then, faintly, her own voice whispered. The 4th toothbrush was never evidence. It was invitation. The power flickered. Her reflection on the window glass smiled before she did. "You're next," it mouthed. The lights went out, leaving only the faint rhythmic sound. Slow, deliberate, brushing in the dark. 4 strokes. Then, silence. The house in Greenridge Hills stood condemned now, a hollow monument fenced off by the city. Yet Lena found herself drawn back one last time. The front door creaked open as though it remembered her. Inside, everything was as it had been. The stains, the silence, the stillness. Only one difference. On the bathroom sink sat a single white toothbrush. She approached slowly, heart pounding in her ears. It was new, unused, its handle inscribed with 4 letters. Lena. The air thickened. Behind her, the faint sound of brushing began again. She turned sharply. Nothing. The sound stopped. But the toothbrush was wet. Tomas waited in the car outside, watching the house's outline tremble against the dawn. He felt the weight of his service pistol on his thigh, the silence pressing too close. Then his phone buzzed. A video message from an unknown number. He opened it. The footage showed Lena inside the bathroom, filmed from the corner ceiling, brushing her teeth with the white toothbrush. But she wasn't looking at the mirror. She was looking directly at the camera, smiling faintly. "Thomas," she said softly. "It's clean now." The message ended with a still frame of her eyes, too wide, too still like glass. Hours later, the precinct buzzed with quiet dread. Lena was nowhere to be found. The official story would call it a disappearance, but Thomas knew better. He played the footage again, freeze-framing Lena's reflection mid-smile. Behind her, barely visible, a fourth figure stood, its hand resting on her shoulder. "She's part of it now," he muttered. Evie, pale and trembling, leaned over his desk. "Then who's filming us?" Thomas looked up, realizing too late that the red recording light on his office camera was blinking. The lens shifted slightly on its own, as if adjusting focus. "It's still watching," Evie whispered. The city deemed the Greenridge Hills house unstable and scheduled demolition. Evie insisted on documenting it, claiming closure. As the machines roared to life, she stood back, camera steady. When the first wall fell, the mirror crashed outward, shattering across the dirt. In every shard, Evie caught glimpses of the same four figures: Lena, Thomas, Sloane, and herself. Each brushing, each smile. Then her camera glitched, replaying the footage backward, the shards reassembling into the mirror again. On the final frame, words appeared across the glass. "Observer complete." The machinery stopped. The air went still. Something was finished. Or beginning. Weeks later, Thomas visited Evie at her new apartment, camera in hand. "We should record a final statement," she said quietly. "Tell people it's over." But when they played back the footage afterward, neither appeared on screen. Only the bathroom's sink, gleaming and empty. 4 toothbrushes aligned perfectly. "That's not possible," Thomas murmured. Evie looked at the reflection in the screen and froze. "Thomas," she whispered. "There are 4 of us." The reflection showed them both, and 2 others standing behind them, smiling faintly, brushing in silence. The recording cut out. Somewhere, unseen, the brushing continued.